Today, we have Jeff Speegle in town. I've been asking Jeff to stop by the next time he's on I-5 and walk around our wrecking yard with Scott and I and show us some things. Jeff has a really unique background. Not only is he very involved with Mustangs, Cougars, Shelbys, very involved in the Concours Mustang Forum. And by the way, the Concours Mustang Forum isn't just for Mustang guys. Cougar guys go there too. They're built in the same plants. Cyclone guys, come on over, learn a lot if you are restoring a car to that level. Anyway, let's go out in the wrecking yard and let's look for some fun stuff to teach you about markings on these cars and oddities and what you need to know when you're doing a Concours restoration. Okay, I'm thinking this here is something from the occult, but Jeff might have a different idea here. Get in there and tell us what you think that is. Just look at this whole thing and tell me what your investigative eyes see on this chunk of metal.
Well, looking at what we've got here, we've got a paint splotch, which is apparently cleaning out a spray gun. This can either match the car before, just painted previously, and they're bleeding some of the paint off, or it's to the car that it came on, and we can look at that color and tell it's not a match there, so it must be from the car before. You'll often see a splotch either on this side or that side. Tells us typically it's probably a Dearborn car, only because of that placement. The D indicated for, depending on what plant, there's either a process or something that was completed or supposed to be made. The cross through it was probably a check saying it was made. You'll see the D's on Dearborn and San Jose cars. And in this general area, if it was a car with a 6-cylinder or a big motor or something special, often you'll find a code or an indicator of that engine code. But this is probably, we haven't even looked yet, probably a more standard motor, a small block or something like that. As we rotate around and we continue to investigate what we got here, and again, this is collecting for just posterity. You collect all this information, you put it together, it paints a picture for us of what they were doing on the line. It's basically just investigative. You put together this thing, see what matches, see what patterns pop up and are identifiable. Here on the front radiator support, on the lower section, you'll see a series of numbers. This is most likely the rotation number for the second half of production. First part, when they were building the body and putting on the trim and stuff, they assigned the car one number of a series, and that was where they fit in the line. Sequential number didn't matter. They didn't build these cars in sequential order. These cars all then went to a holding area, and for the second half of the assembly, putting the motor in, the interiors in, they assigned a second number. This number will match normally the top left-hand corner of the build sheet, which was made in various copies and hung around the car and sent to the sub-assembly areas. This way they could look at the part, see the build sheet, let's say between the seat cushion and the springs, see that the number was 891 or whatever it was, look at the car coming down the line and go, yes, this is the interior for that car, and then put the car in the right, or the part in the right car.
A multitude of items are programmed for production, each component coded by computer and tagged with its own identification sheet, showing its ultimate destination as part of one particular car.
Okay, here's a stumper. Did anybody out here know what this is? Tell us, what do you think?
I often refer to this as a shopping list. It's a big, long series of lists. Normally it's 3 to 4 rows. It's probably 10 to 12 characters. We don't see it on every car. The earliest car I've seen it show up on is a 64.5 Mustang on an assembly line picture. I think, and this is the best guess we got now, is it was probably on a whole stack pallet of these panels during shipment. They marked one on top of the pile to identify who knows what, dealing with the supplier, where it was supposed to be shipped, all those sort of deals. That's why we don't find it very often. You'll normally find this on maybe 1 out of 100 cars. So we're trying to suppose with that rarity, that sort of rotation, not that we've seen every car in the world, but we're trying to come up with something that's logical and fits the bill until we find out or find a worker that can tell us, identify exactly what it is. I haven't been able to find that worker yet, but we continue to look and collect. We probably got 40 or so of these examples. since we're out here in the wrecking yard going through little details and sharing, you'll notice here on this car, the VIN number is stamped here in the front apron, driver's side. On 68s, it can sometimes be confusing because sometimes the VIN will be here visible, other times it'll be hidden underneath the fender edge. And if you compare enough cars and start looking into it, what it is just a practice difference between two different plants. One had it hidden below here, one had it visible in 68 since they transitioned to the VIN being underneath the windshield. So something you'll see it shows may make you wonder, may make you think that the panel's been replaced if you're used to seeing the VIN visible. But it may just be the car was built at a different plant. Hints or clues are everywhere. It's just what you do with them, Don.
Yep.
But this is just like hunting and, oh, we're back again.
Yeah.
Most important when you're doing this, and even your restorations at home, pay attention to everything. We want to be so quick and fast about tearing our car apart because we want to get in the project. We overlook details and hints that might be important later. Document them, bag stuff, pay attention to them because they may be important to you later, or somebody else is building a similar car. We just simply open this car up. Don't know what they all mean, but the idea is to collect them, share them, and find out maybe what they mean. Looking down here into the car, we notice the carpet is folded up on the edge. There's actually a number written on the edge of the carpet. Don't know if that's a rotation number, could be. I've never seen it, never noticed it before, but now we'll know to check there and look there and collect some more. Also, as you move into the heater, the front of the heater box, top right hand corner, up near where the anchor is, you'll see a stamp that the supplier for the heater put on, so it showed the application. There was a number of different heater cores for air conditioning and regular. There were certain applications because of where the hoses were. And you'll also see a couple different stamps. One is that one is a 2-line. So keep your eyes open. They're nice to preserve. They're nice to reproduce if you have to. But again, share with the other community because when we get enough data points, you can paint a picture, at least come to some better conclusions and understandings.
Okay, Jeff, what are these 4 numbers on the bottom of this 72 grill off a special paint code car?
It's thought that these are probably or likely a date for when the headlight assembly was put together. The only reason why that tends to match up is we've seen other ones that the codes once decoded like you normally would, a month, day of month, and year, work out to fit the car, or at least prior to when the car was built. My 71 Cougar was exactly the same. It had a date. The guy was nice enough to write dashes in between the numbers for us. So that's what we believe that it is. A lot of this is just supposition based on findings and what works out till something better comes along if it ever does.
There you go. Okay, we got an early car here. Zoom in on this VIN number. It's 500121. That's an early car.
70.
Yeah, and you always hit your head on the 70s. So I see a couple odd things. Jeff pointed out the decal there that used to be under the interval wiper box, which I didn't notice that, but tell us about that box there, Jeff. Tell us about that sticker.
Those were used at Dearborn to confirm that inspections have been taking place, whether it be paint, whether it be trim, whether it be electrical, things like that. Dearborn documented them that way. The inspector would complete his inspection, his traveler's sheet as we refer to it, and place that sticker on.
Here on the final line, 1 out of every 10 men is an inspector. There's a lot to check out. Everything that moves, or latches, or turns, or swivels, or runs, or lights up, or does anything.
Sometimes during 69, they were actually putting the inspector's name printed on each of the labels that they were given in a little bitty roll. Here, by this time, and in 69 also, they started stamping those. Rather than printing it, they actually stamped them with a number.
And so that's why we're seeing black behind here, is that's a punched out letter, maybe a H?
Most normal, looking at other ones, normally it's a double-digit number. This is possibly 23.
Okay.
From my angle. It's hard. The paper goes, often as Don was mentioning earlier, in our discussion before we started filming, is normally you just find the residue of the adhesive left, maybe whatever stickers and dust and stuff had stuck to it since then. And most of the time you find just remnants of that. So just another one of those little clues. You often just open up the engine compartment and start going at it, seeing what you find that's different.
What else do you see different here?
Interesting thing is on this car, it's got a cowl support, an extra reinforcement between the stock shock tower supports. Most often see that on Boss 302s. I don't know what it's doing on this car. You see some hot rod stuff done with the motor. Could have been added? Possibly.
Yeah, but a hot rod guy would have put a one-piece export brace on.
Yeah, well, and also where that piece came from. He would have had to either get it from the service counter at Ford or off a donor Boss 302. So the question is, where did it come from if he had it? A lot of weird and unusual things. You can't make assumptions about anything. Again, document, compare. I'd start hunting for the other cars that had low digits like this to see if they had a similar feature.
So if you want to tell the difference between an original decal VIN tag on the door and an aftermarket one, set it up in the sun like this for a year or so. Maybe it'll fade through as void. So I've been taking apart these cars since they were just old used cars and not classics, and I've noticed primarily, exclusively, on San Jose cars, you'll see these ink stamps, P-30, Ambris, and after a while you see some of the same names enough times, you kind of feel like they're friends. Like we have something in common. He put it together, I took it apart. Explain why they put an ink stamp on a silly nose cone.
Earlier in the video, we talked about the paper stickers we found out there on the Dearborn cars with the paint inspector's number stamped in the decal or the sticker. At San Jose, they followed a different procedure. They had an ink stamp they gave to every inspector that identified and made them responsible for whatever they were inspecting. At San Jose and every plant, they had one inspector inspecting the unibody, which was over on the line. Then all these individual pieces that were being painted individually off on another side of the plant had a different inspector. So on this one, Mr. P30, who was assigned to that number, was working on the individual parts pieces during that period, and he put a stamp on every piece he looked at and inspected. You can take, and if you collect enough of these things, you'll see patterns. 68 especially had 3 different patterns they ran through during the 1 year. P30 is a mid-year period to beginning of 68. Later they went to the name. They normally used the gentleman's last name until it got too long.
Or abbreviated.
Well, some of them were shortened, or if they were too long a last name, they changed to the guy's first name. If you talk to enough workers, most of them will remember the painters. There's one painter named Henry. We actually knew him. He went to work for Westinghouse after he left San Jose plant. We actually got his paint stamp from him.
Ooh, really?
Yeah, so, and it was a friend, and the nice thing is, in our general area, we're only about a half an hour from San Jose, so a lot of the workers continued to work in Silicon Valley. Wasn't Silicon Valley then, but yeah, with the other manufacturing in this general area. So from Ambris, we would assume, and actually the date code in the panel suggests it's a late car. 6th month is when the panel was stamped, so it was probably at the plant the 7th month or the 8th month, right near the end of production, is when we would have found the last names used. This would have been the tail end, same month, and apparently this is just when they were doing the transition. The full name ones, you'll normally see nothing but in 69, almost about 90% of that. Depends on how old the inspector was, depends on when they traded out, depends on how much they wore about the stamp when they got the new ones. So just another one of these details.
Sometimes there's some anomalies, and sometimes putting an NOS part on your car makes it incorrect.
Without a doubt.
What's going on here? I see, look at this. D0ZB. I'll bet money if I peel this little piece of, is that duct tape?
It's tape of some.
Oh, what do you know? Underneath it says C9ZB. And I'll bet if I peel back this sticker here, I'll bet underneath there, well, we're just gonna, I bet money it says C9 under there. What's going on with this 69 part being repackaged as a 70?
So this is a service replacement part. It appears what there was there's a change or a problem with the C9 one. They went and fixed it, found out what the difference is, and rather than coming up and restamping a whole bunch of pieces and throwing away a lot of stuff, you update what you have in place. You got to differentiate it from the old parts. So you stamp an ink number on it, you send out a label, and you remark the boxes, and now you've got the new and improved part on the shelf for your service departments to sell.
And Scott probably knows what went on internally here, Scott.
On these, we find they have a captured small fuse on the little printed circuit board, and they were popping frequently. And the later ones, and I've seen a lot of them, they've soldered on a little piece of wire that actually looks like a paper clip. Right on the outside of that fuse was solder, and you see it consistently on a lot of these cars. And it's not just a one-off, it was made that way.
So if you find one of these or if yours doesn't work, don't throw it away. There's an easy fix when you open these up.
Yeah, a lot of times it's just that fuse.
Okay, this is just a taste of what goes on at mercurycougar.net, Classic Cougar Community, the Concours Mustang Forum, the CJ.
The CJ site, the SAC site, all those things were pretty much many similar people are on a lot of them. This goes on every day today, phone calls, private discussions, but we often want to share it with everybody because we get a lot more input that way.
Exactly. The 429 Mega Site's a good one. A lot of people just want to call West Coast Classic Cougar or whatever your favorite Mustang vendor is, get all the information from him. Ain't gonna happen. We don't have time, and I only know this much. And a lot of this much that I know, I got it from one of these sites. So go to the source, spend some time there. It's interesting, even if you don't use it to do your restoration. It's really interesting. It's fun. The guys are real friendly there.
Concourse, no E.
Tell us about your childhood and what your father did and what got you into this carcheology, this investigator mindset with old cars.
I started out young. I grew up in cars. Dad was a drag racer, ran West Coast champions and stuff like that, ran a gas car and some modified cars. We ran drag strips during my young years. During high school, I worked at a drag strip. During that process, we built dune buggies, then we moved on to early Ford V8 cars and started restoring those and showing them. So I grew up with that end of things. And then in the 70s, we found that most of these guys with the Model A's and stuff were buying new Mustangs or wanting to buy old Mustangs for their family, for their kids and stuff. At the same time, my dad moved into becoming a auto theft detective at the police department. Moved up through the ranks and became that. So he was doing his car thing along with his background in hot rodding and stuff like this would all fit together really well. And from him, I learned those sort of techniques on how to do things with VIN numbers and what people were doing and what the thieves would do. And that eventually, when I finally got through everything else, doing all my yards and wrecking yards and building cars myself, that all came together to form what I know today. So you end up with the historical side of how the cars were built. You get together with what can be done by people trying to get over on people, build cars out of half of this car, half of that car, or simply rebody the car or drivetrains. So that all came together. I now use that to inspect cars and look at for the registries, like the Shelby registries and stuff. I go out and look at cars and try to validate it or at least give a solid opinion of what the car is today. So Don, that's basically what I got is I'm able to look at it from the investigative side, real scientifically of here's just basically the facts, the steps, what we should see, what we don't see, what matches up in order to put together a basic case so that somebody else can look at it and go, okay, isn't it something I want to buy based on what the facts are.
So if you're buying a six-figure car, maybe, and we're talking Ford products here, maybe it's a good idea to talk to this guy beforehand, not after.
Always much better before. That way you're not stuck with the thing. It's still your decision. Afterwards, you're stuck with the car to a certain extent.
Reach out to them at the Concours Mustang Forum if you're interested in a service like that, or just an opinion. There's other guys there, really smart.
And there are other guys that do that too.
Yeah, and
not the only one.
Yeah, regionally it might make more sense to have one of your other buddies check into it.
Yeah, they may be closer. At the same point, considering it's a six-figure car, don't think about local. Don't think about what's handy. Find the best person that fits your needs. Get them there. Spend the extra dollars so that you feel comfortable with what you're buying. Get that foundation before you put more money in it, before you start a restoration project, so that you know what you're getting into. Not afterwards. There's some really ugly stories, and there's some people who've been put into situations they probably didn't need to be.
Right. Well, many times, in fact, last couple of weeks ago, I was talking to Kevin Marty, and I stumped him. We were talking about seat belts and what this number means and blah, 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 and he goes, you know what? Go to Jeff Speegle.